Hello, and thanks for joining us for All Things DSO today. I'm Beth Gaddis, the Editor-in-Chief at Planet DDS, and I'm joined by my friend Brian Colao, the Director of the Dykema DSO Industry Group. Brian, it's great to see you.
Good to see you, Beth. It's been too long since we did this, I think.
I agree, and it's so much fun to do it when it's live like this. So you just got back from London. Tell us what you were doing over there.
Well, I did get invited to speak at an AI event in London that was sort of its first of its kind. And, I really had fun. I mean, we were talking about diagnostic AI and other uses of AI that a lot of the people listening here may have heard. Here in the US, there's a lot of really good folks doing that. But in the UK, it's really in the early stages and people really are hungry for that kind of information. So it was really like a mission of education, and everybody, sometimes in the US, and I don't blame people, if they've heard it before, they're on their phone, or, they come to half of it and leave. Over there, boy, nobody was on their phone, and they were listening to every minute of it, because I truly believe it was the first time they heard a lot of this stuff. So it was real fun to be able to make that presentation.
It's really interesting just how AI has exploded. I mean, I feel like this year, more than ever before, it's about the AI receptionist that I'm hearing a ton of chatter about. Is that what you're hearing too from the groups that you were talking to?
Well, it just keeps evolving, right? If there was, AI for patient retention that listens to phone calls, our friend Amal at Patient Prism was one of the first, to kind of roll that out. Then there was diagnostic AI, and our friends at Pearl do a lot of that stuff. There's others, but, Pearl in particular comes to mind. But now, they're rolling out, I would say the newest thing, like the newest sort of add-on or nuance or wrinkle to the whole thing is they call them agents. I mean, I don't think they like the term bots. If you say bot, it's got a negative connotation. Nobody likes that. And I feel like it may be an unfair term, because a bot was very, very limited. And I think these agents are quite sophisticated. They can take phone calls and literally talk to people and handle most situations. I mean, and I think in the years that follow here, eventually you're going to get an agent that can handle pretty much any situation. Now, I would say you can talk to an agent. I've done this actually because I'm really skeptical. Beth, I don't like this stuff. I still like human beings, and I'm a little old fashioned. And I've told some of my friends in AI, give me that agent. Let me see. And I have to admit, it was really sophisticated. Okay. I was very skeptical. I would say things to try to trip up the agent just to kind of be obnoxious. And I would say mostly they're getting very good with this stuff. They're getting to the point where, I'll take a call with an agent. I was probably the last one. A lot of people are open-minded and happy to do it. And I was like the last holdout. Like, I want to talk to a human being. I'm not talking to an agent, but, they're getting sophisticated enough. And the thing is, some of these agents, they can take, 50, 60, 70, 100 calls simultaneously. So, if you presented me with the choice right now in 2025, you could talk to a live human being, but you got to sit there for 30 or 40 minutes and be on hold, or, we'll give you the agent right now, but right now you could talk to the agent. I would say for most things, you can talk to the agent.
It's really interesting, just all the different ways that AI is getting integrated into every aspect of our businesses and our lives. I just was on a conversation with a COO of a group that has 37 practices. And their format is that there's no corporate headquarters. All of the executives are remote. And one of the things that he's in charge of is training, obviously. And so he was talking about a new AI system that they had just put in, where they're now recording the consultations that their team is doing with patients. And then they have trained the AI to basically determine, and evaluate, how did that consultation go? What could they have done better? What was the phrasing that the patient really seemed to respond to?
I hope you're saying for educational purposes, because as soon as I hear that HIPAA, I start to get worried about that. So anybody listening, I would be remiss if I didn't say you got to be HIPAA compliant.
Absolutely.
If you're going to record patients, there's a lot of, this is not a legal seminar, but there are regulatory hoops you must jump through if you're going to record patients, and you got to be HIPAA compliant. And there are certain exceptions for education and training, but nobody should just undertake that. I would be remiss, without, making sure you're regulatory compliant. But there is a way to do it. And I think it could be a great tool as long as you follow the regulations.
Well, I just thought it was really interesting too, how people are using these tools now and for educational purposes, for training purposes, in order to really improve the patient experience, the operatory experience, and then also to help elevate the skills of all of your team members, whether they're clinicians or if they're treatment coordinators that are now presenting or practice managers, everybody in the practice, it just helps them to elevate their skills to be able to get this instant feedback. And to your point of being able to then train at scale, this is one of the ways that AI can help.
Well, you can do it quickly. I mean, that's the thing, right? The old-fashioned way, the old-fashioned way is you didn't have any means. You had to stand in the room and shadow these people, and that was incredibly inefficient and, quite frankly, not possible at scale. If you've got 37 offices, you don't got 37 people that are going to, shadow people. So then the next iteration was, the AI would listen, on a limited basis, and you would, be able to sort of go through and listen to some of that information. But this iteration is you can monitor 37 things simultaneously and get reports. And it's, the speed of it. What I've always said is when human beings are working on AI, it kind of goes like this. When AI works on AI, it goes like this because the AI keeps refining the AI. So a lot of those tools in the example you gave of 37 offices, you could simultaneously be listening and analyzing, treatment room conversations and other things. Again, as long as it's done regulatory compliant, you could be listening to that stuff simultaneously and get reports in real time on all of it. And it's just going to get faster and faster. We're getting to the point where you can click a button and in a fraction of a second, you can get a lot of data. Obviously, you have to let the calls play out. There's no substitute. You got to let it finish. But what you could do is say you wanted to check at the practice is closed at 6 p.m. At 6:01, it's getting to the point where you can press a button and it will analyze all of the visits for the entire day. And in a matter of a couple seconds, you'll get analysis on that. And that's just so exciting that we've gotten to that point.
It is. It just gives so many more tools and data. And, we talk all the time about how data is a new commodity, right? When you have data, you can make important decisions that really drive your business forward and base it on fact, not on a feeling, not on an impression, not on hearsay, but based on what is really happening within your practices. And that's
the stuff that has really excited me. It's not out yet. It's in beta testing and they're looking at it, but there's not, to my knowledge, a company that's offering this yet, is predictive analysis, where they're going to look at your mouth right now and they're going to say, in your case, Beth, we know you're 29 years old. So they're going to say, you're 29 years old and your teeth are in certain condition for 29 years old. And based on billions of case studies we've looked at, we think your teeth are going to look like this when you're 39, when you're 49, when you're 59, when you're 69. And they can say, if you don't make any changes, you might get periodontal disease. You might lose this tooth. This tooth over here might have this problem. So let's, now that you're 29, try to be proactive and make a whole bunch of changes. So we don't get to you being 39 or 49 and saying, oops, didn't know that was going to happen. We can predict it in advance and take, proactive measures. And that's the stuff that it's not quite ready yet, but it's just about ready. And I think it's going to be a game changer when that stuff rolls out.
I completely agree. And not just for patient care, but also for operations. I know that at Planet DDS, we're working on predictive analytics that include looking at patient behavior when they've scheduled a phone call, scheduled an appointment. Did they actually show up for it or did they not? And then we can basically ascribe a score to say at what level of risk is this person from being a no-show, so that then your team can make decisions about whether they should potentially double book for that particular time spot so that they don't have open chair time at the end of it. And as we get more data and as we prove out these concepts and as we go to market and as we keep getting more and more information, the systems will keep getting better and better and better so that the predictive analytics will be spot on.
No, the predictive analytics are really the most exciting thing. I remember when it was diagnostic AI, that was the most exciting. And I'm still excited with diagnostic AI, not just because in real time it'll look at an X-ray, but it can retroactively go through all the patient records and flag things that were missed, in examinations before it was adopted or existed. And that's exciting. But this predictive stuff is going to be sort of next level on all of it, not just, scheduling appointments and predicting who's going to show up or who's not going to show up. But, Amal Nergurdkar did an excellent presentation in London about sort of tailored analysis, right? It used to be we would just give you analysis. We looked at your practices and this is what we're seeing. Now it'll say, look, you got 37 practices. These 5 need more patients. These other 5 have too many patients and need more chairs, or you got to hire somebody. So it'll break down 37 offices and say, hey, these 10 have this problem. These 5 has these problem. These 3 have this other problem. So in particular, hey, practice number 26, 27, and 28, we got to do this. Practice 5, 6, and 7, we have to do this. And it can really tailor your approach. So if you're like a regional vice president or a manager or chief operating officer, you can look at all 37 on a dashboard and say, okay, my plan of action for practices 1 through 5 is this. My plan of action for 26, 27, 28 is this. And you can sort of really tailor different things for different offices. And it's just exciting. I mean, it's very, very exciting. But last comment on this part, because I know I've said it like 4 times. The technology is moving faster than the regulations. So you got to be careful to make sure before you adopt some of this new stuff that it's regulatory compliant, because, the technology, dental boards move real slow. Legislatures move real slow. AI moves real fast. Just when you thought you understood what was out there and you made a rule about it, you got something, you thought it was version 1.0 and we're on version 5.0 and the rule pertained to version 1.0. So we really got to make sure we're regulatory compliant, particularly with HIPAA and some other things, but it's incredible technology.
Well, speaking of regulations, changing gears a little bit, the biggest news that I thought came out last week was that Delta Dental of Wisconsin acquired a DSO, Cherry Tree Dental. It's a DSO with more than 40 affiliated practices. I got to tell you, I personally was surprised that that was not a conflict of interest. What did you think when you saw that?
Well, there's no regulations of this. When you say conflict of interest, and I understand, and what you're talking about, Beth, is the ADA issued a statement that it could be a potential conflict of interest, and we've got to watch, these insurance acquisitions really carefully, and that's where you're kind of. I understand the point you're making, but usually for a conflict of like a real conflict of interest, there's a rule somewhere. Your company has a conflict of interest policy, or if you're a lawyer, you have an ethical rule you got to follow, or the state bar rule, or there's something you got to look at. In the case of this, we don't got no rules yet. So, when I think of these things, I think of a couple things. Insurance companies can be very valuable to the industry right now because they're sitting on piles of cash. Okay. And they have the ability to make some acquisitions. And in a time when there's still an M&A drought going on and it's difficult to close transactions, parties such as insurance companies can come in and do deals. And I think a lot of people, would like that, would say, hey, if the insurance company is going to be the buyer and they're going to come in and they're going to close this transaction, for a lot of people, investors and others, that could be a wonderful development. But the issue is what happens after that. Now, typically, because I read the ADA statement and they were talking about, they were concerned about, pricing and reimbursement rates, and would there be arm's length negotiations, or what would happen with all that stuff? None of this has happened to scale yet. There's been a handful of insurance companies I know. Off the top of my head, it's like 3 or 4 that own DSOs. It's not been widespread yet. So I think at the moment, and obviously the acquisition you talked about is 40 offices. It's not thousands. So, right now, I'm not overly concerned with it. I think it's a positive that they came in and did the deal and allowed a transaction, sort of to close. But I do think as it ramps up, if it is to happen, and a lot of people are predicting there's going to be some widespread acquisitions by insurance companies. I've not seen it yet, but I mean, if it does play out that way, then, as it sort of starts to scale up and more practices, become owned by insurance payers, then, yeah, I mean, I think we may be headed towards some sort of regulations that define specifically what a conflict of interest is, not what the ADA in their statement thinks it could possibly potentially be, but somebody actually says, here are some rules, here are some things that concern us, and here are some do's and don'ts for how we're going to do this. And it's too early. We're not there yet. So, that transaction, I think it's something to think about and something to watch. That particular transaction doesn't concern me, but the trend of if this is going to keep happening on a regular basis, it's definitely something we have to pay attention to. And I definitely think there is going to have to be some rules around it in the future.
I just thought that it would be really interesting. Let's say that I'm now a doctor at Cherry Tree Dental and I have prescribed or diagnosed that something is needed and gone ahead and performed it, and we've submitted the claim. And then if it gets denied by the by Delta Dental of Wisconsin, like that's where I see it as being a troubling occurrence.
Well, it's a troubling occurrence only if it happens outside of the ordinary course of business. I mean, if they submitted a claim that was an error and it got rejected the same way anybody else's claim would be rejected, then that doesn't bother me. But if there's some preferential rules in place or some type of, situation that's now out of the ordinary, and that's what they've done to the insurance companies in other situations. Like I'll give you an example. You have, we both have, I won't name a name. We both have XYZ insurance company, right? I ram into your car and you're covered by them and I have them. So now my carrier is negotiating against you, but they're the same carrier. There are insurance regulations that govern that. And they've got to isolate each other. They can't collude with each other. They can't say, oh, because, we're both the same company, let's lower the amount we pay. Like they can't play games like that. The insurance department has caught up with that. It's something we see all the time. The same insurance carrier involved in both sides of the accident or whatever. And there's rules. There's rules for how they do that. They have to separate each adjuster. They can't directly negotiate. There's rules for they can't share information with each other. The settlements that they make have to be in line with similar settlements. They can't make when we're involved on both ends, we got a special settlement, but we got different ones that can't do that. It's got to be the same for everybody. So there's rules in place for that, and I think in this context, there's going to have to be rules in place eventually. I don't think it's gone on enough, or there are enough DSOs owned by insurance payers that, it's like a big priority at the moment, although we'll see. The ADA has made it a priority, so maybe that'll catch some attention. But if this keeps going on at scale, they're just going to have to put rules in place.
Brian, have you seen any other industries that are moving into acquiring DSOs or talking about acquiring DSOs?
I have seen, and this raises, similar questions, and we can't really talk about specifics, but, some general dental technology companies are sort of like, toying with the idea of maybe, or other companies in the dental industry, I know, are toying with the idea of potentially, getting involved with it. And, they have to analyze whether it's going to create any type of, not just like legal conflicts or technical conflicts, but business conflicts, like if you do business with all these, if you're a company and you do business with a bunch of DSOs, but then they think you might be competing with them because you're going to open up your own DSO, that might raise some issues. So I think, there's a lot of interest from a lot of non-traditional, not just private equity groups, but, say insurance companies we see have interest, and, just other folks in the dental industry have interest, other organizations. Hey, should we buy a DSO or not? And they've got to make their own decision as to whether it's going to create either actual conflicts or just business conflicts where it might be bad for business.
Well, across the industry right now, we've just finished the first half of 2025. Tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing in the M&A landscape right now.
Well, the same thing we've been seeing. I wish, I keep wishing you and I could have a different conversation, but, the uncertainty type things keep occurring. Like last time, I think I was talking about unrest in the Middle East as being one of the factors, and we had a little war breakout on top of everything else. So it got worse, if you will. I know it's at the moment they're talking about ceasefires and it seems a little more stable, but literally, I guess we're doing this once a quarter now. And when we did our last one, we had a war breakout since the last one. So some of these things just are hanging around. Certainly the Ukraine war is hanging around. The Middle East situation, unfortunately, is hanging around. Some of the rebel groups that are doing bad things are, hanging around and disrupting things. The interest rates are really not coming down. The Fed said it was going to keep them steady the last, I think, meeting for sure. I think the president got into a fight, said he might fire somebody. They were going back and forth about that. So the interest rates are not coming down. And that is mainly because inflation is stubbornly above the 2% benchmark. Last I looked, I don't know what it is today, but it was like 2.4, 2.5. So it was a half point above where it would have to be. And that can take a while to go down. So the stock market's hanging in there and doing pretty well, but inflation is not under control. The interest rates haven't come down. A lot of the unrest in the Middle East and elsewhere is still going on. So unfortunately, we're still in this situation where, smaller deals are occurring, we're doing them, but the big transactions that everybody wants to see to recycle the investor money, they're just not happening. And here we are, it's the 7th or 8th today, so we're at the sort of in the third quarter here. I don't see it for this quarter. I'm holding out some hope at the end of the year maybe, but it still is looking more and more likely that, if you're wanting to do, a significant transaction, it's going to have to be in 26. I mean, look, I'm holding out hope that we see some good things, in the end of the year, but it's looking more and more likely like 26.
Can you give me a little bit more? Tell me a little bit about how many transactions have actually closed and I don't know maybe the last 2.5 years versus how many have not closed?
Yeah, I mean, there's a slide that's widely circulating that I'll just at a high level talk about because I don't, it's been talked about a zillion times at a high level at conferences, but the actual slide might be, somebody think it's not for me, but somebody's claiming maybe it's confidential or something. But at a high level, what's been talked about is there's been about 42 transactions that's been abandoned and 7 of them have gone through since, middle of 22. And the terms of the 7 are not thrilling. I mean, different people have different opinions, but they're not in such a way. A couple of them were sort of more what you'd call distressed or special situations. They're not going to establish strong comparables for the industry. So really that's, if you talk to most of the brokers, iBankers out there, they'll reference, something around 42 deals that were abandoned and like 7 that closed, and the 7 that closed were, I'm talking about significant deals. Obviously little onesies and twosies close all the time, continuing to do those type of deals, but significant deals, it's been really, I mean, what I would want to see in a healthy market is something like 42 went through and 7 or 8 were abandoned. I mean, that's what I would like to see, but it's inverted the other way, unfortunately.
Well, and obviously interest rates plays a huge role in those abandoned deals. What are some of the other reasons that the deals are getting abandoned?
Well, people are being much more selective and much more risk averse. I mean, the obvious reason you said the interest rates are high, the cost of lending, is very, very high. So the multiples and the offers that are made are going to be lower, because the buying power is less. And some people are going to look at those numbers and say that's not attractive, so we're not going to do it. But the situations where the number was actually okay, where they said, look, maybe it's a little lower than we wanted, but let's go ahead. Let's kind of proceed. Things that pop up during diligence are taken much more seriously now because some people had some very bad experiences, some investors over the last couple of years. So maybe, there's a lawsuit, there's a regulatory action, there's some other sort of problem or business issue about the sustainability. Like your EBITDA was strong, but they just closed the big, automobile plant across the street. So now we're worried, last year was good, but is that going to continue? I mean, things like that. There's a term called seasoned EBITDA. If you've got, and that just kind of came up last couple of years. If you've got EBITDA that's real, but it's new, maybe we got to give you a couple years and make sure it's sustainable, whereas if it was 2019, 2021 and the EBITDA was there, they would make do the deal based on that EBITDA. Now they're sort of saying, well, it's kind of brand new EBITDA. Like if your EBITDA was 10 million for the last 5 years, you're good. But if your EBITDA was like 5 million, 6 million, 7, and then it got to 10 and you're like, hey, I want 10 million. They're going to be like, no, it just showed up as 10 and we're not sure if it's real or not. So a whole bunch of of reasons have popped up that are giving buyers, are being a lot more cautious about it. It could be, again, regulatory actions, lawsuits where they would close over it before. Now they're like, nope, until that gets resolved, we're not going to close. It could be positive things like, look at our EBITDA. And they're like, yeah, but is it real? Is it not? It could be business factors. A dentist leaves, or they look at it and they say, these dentists, could leave, and we're worried if this is sustainable. So a whole bunch of things. I think in the first instance, a lot of transactions die simply because you can't come to an agreement on valuation. And that has everything to do with interest rates and what people are able to offer in this environment. And that probably craters, the majority of deals. But then the ones that kind of go through where you agreed to price, something, Beth, happens in diligence. I've been walking through some of the things. There's a whole bunch of others that come up, and things that would have been, looked past in 18, 19, 20, 21 are not being looked. They're being heavily scrutinized, and they're really, really digging in. I mean, I had one recently. They got some Medicaid letters, some investigation type things, which anybody that takes Medicaid is going to get investigation letters. Like, I looked at them and I was sort of like, these are pretty routine. They're pretty standard. I've been doing this 30 years. Somebody might have to pay back a little money, but it's not going to be earth shattering. Like, my blood pressure was not up about it, but the buyer went nuts. Like, this was the end of the world. Like, a meteor was going to strike the earth or something. And they ended up not doing the deal. And I'd never seen such what I consider a relatively minor sort of investigation letter absolutely trigger that type of paranoia. So, it's just tough right now. Nobody wants to make a mistake and buy something that ends up being subject to some type of problem. So people are the most cautious, probably the most cautious I've seen in 30 years of doing this. That's where they are right now.
I talked to a technology advisor for a private equity company yesterday, and he was telling me that they had looked at two groups. One was about 50 locations, and I'm not sure the size of the other one, and walked away because they didn't have the tech stack in place. And they felt like if they acquired it, it was going to be such a huge investment on the backside to basically standardize everything, bring them all onto a single practice management system, put in the tech stack that they needed to put into place in order to get the efficiencies, that it wasn't worth the investment for them at that time.
Yeah, I mean, that's not new. That's correct. I mean, that's absolutely correct what you're saying. And in this technology age we're in right now, the savvy buyers are starting to look, or even if the buyers aren't savvy, they're hiring consultants that really know what they're doing. And they're being savvy about it. And they're looking at technology where that wasn't, a huge focal point years before it is now. And yeah, I mean, this is something I've talked on over the years, last 10 years, Beth, you might have heard me say things like, is your organization like a house? Is it move-in ready, or is it a fixer-upper? And if it's a fixer-upper, some people aren't interested in it. Now, anybody that buys houses knows some people want fixer-uppers. Like, we buy ugly houses, you see that. Some people love that. Like, they want that. Other people are like, look, if I've got to redo the floors and repaint the thing and put new carpet in, now somebody else can do that. Somebody else might say, hey, I know how to do all that. Maybe I can get a little bit of a bargain on this and go buy it. But it's similar in dental organizations. If you don't have the infrastructure, and that's not a new thing, that's been there as long as I've been talking about the M&A markets. If you don't have the infrastructure and the buyer is going to have to put all new infrastructure in, some buyers won't do it. Some will if they know what they're doing, but some will say, yeah, we're just not going to be able to do that. It's too much of a project. Because if they're looking to turn it in 3 or 4 or 5 years, they might say, hey, it's a 2-year project coming in and putting all this stuff in. And then we're already almost at our window, and it's just not for us.
So we have a couple of questions that have come in. Do you mind if we go to some live questions?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. So one is, can you talk about how recaps can affect a seller's initial equity roll, meaning the seller's inability to liquidate their entire rolled equity position?
Yeah, he who has the gold, or I should say he or she, I'm a woman in DSO, I should say he or she who has the gold makes the rules, is what I was going to say. So a buyer can walk up and say, look, we'll do this deal. And that's happening now. Before this drought, I would say it was so competitive, people are going to buy it and you're going to probably be able to liquidate most of your rollover. Now it's very common on the deals that are going through, and some of them like I said, have cratered and not gone through, but the construct that was being proposed. So I know this is on the buyer's mind, even if the deal didn't go through. This was part of the general framework is, hey, if you've got a 40% rollover from when this DSO bought, your organization, we'll give you like 20% and you got to roll the other 20. We're not giving you all your money out of there or some other thing. And you can take it or leave it. But again, he or she who has the gold makes the rules. And that's what we're seeing right now, because a lot of the buyers are like, if we de-incentivize you and let you cash out everything, what if you take off and leave? And, then we got to replace you. So we want to keep you incentivized. So I'm seeing a lot of that right now where, you might have done a deal that was 60-40 and you've rolled 40 and you're waiting for the second equity event. And when the second equity event arrives, the offer is not, hey, we're going to liquidate your whole 40. It's we're going to give you some cash out, but some's going to have to stay, particularly for younger dentists. If you're 70, they'll probably, cash you out at some level. But if you're, 42 or 50 or 48 or something, or 30 something, they're going to say, nope, we're going to give you some of it and we want you to stay.
And I'm hearing that they want them to stay for 5 years to 10 years. Is that still accurate?
Well, 5 is the standard. I don't see 10 very much. We don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. I mean, I haven't seen, I can say in the many, many deals I've looked at, I haven't seen 10 years, but 5 years is very, very standard. I've seen that lowered for older doctors. If you're 71, maybe it's 1 year. Let's just get, let's make sure everything's stable and then we'll let you leave doc after 1 year. If you're 65, maybe it's 3 years, they'll shorten it a little bit. But if you're like, 30s, 40s, 50s, it's going to be a 5-year commitment in almost every situation. Sometimes 4, but in almost every situation, 5 years.
So I had another question that has come in from somebody who works for an insurance company, and it says, how can payers and DSOs work together better to navigate the market? I knew you'd like that one.
Well, the reimbursement rates have to reflect the value of the service provided, and they don't. And, and we have to stop existing in this unnatural state. Yeah, I don't think the person that wrote this, if you can tell they're from an insurance company, they may not like this answer, but I don't, dentistry can't continue to exist in an unnatural state. An unnatural state is where costs go up, costs of labor, costs of supplies, costs of goods go up, maybe tariffs we've been talking about on some of these. And so your costs go up, but the reimbursement rates don't go up or just go up a little bit. I mean, everybody knows, any consumer of what's the most basic service, the electrician, the plumber, somebody come fix your, car or something, they can raise prices. They can say, Beth, your pipes are leaking. We're happy to come to your house, but there's a $20 fuel surcharge. Sorry, we don't control oil prices. They went up. We got to give you a $20 surcharge and then we'll come to your house and fix your pipes. And you're probably like, all right, that makes sense. Come on out. I need the work. Same thing, electrician, your car repairman, hey, the parts that came from China, now they're, they got raised due to a tariff. So, my cost to repair your car just went up. Sorry. And, you're going to be like, all right, that sucks, but I understand what happened here and okay. Dentistry exists in this unnatural state where, costs and expenses and supplies and equipment go up and the reimbursement rates don't go up, or they go up just a tiny amount, and that's got to get corrected. So that's my answer. How are we going to get along better? You got to figure out and make that the reimbursement rate reflect the actual value of the services provided. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. And, we could go on for hours about insurance reform, but that's got to get fixed.
Well, one of the other things about rising costs, we had a question that comes in that says, what do you think of the current hygiene costs and compensation plans? Hygiene compensation plans.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. Like I'll give you another example. This is the problem, right? If hygienists are getting charged, and this is a real concern I did a study on this. It was confidential. I'm sorry, I can't release it, but I did a confidential study on this for a client, and I researched the heck out of this. And a lot of the feedback I got from DSOs was, in this market right now, we got to pay $90 an hour for hygienists often, through temp agencies and other things, when it used to be $45 an hour. And if the reimbursement rate for a payer is $50 and we just paid $90 for this, it's not sustainable. And, some of the conclusions I came to, in that confidential paper I wrote is this is not sustainable. And, we've got to have some reform and we've got to fix this. A lot of hygienists have opted out of full-time jobs. They work for a lot of these staffing companies. And unfortunately, you have to pay a premium to have them, come in. And that premium often is far above what the patient's going to pay or what the payer's going to pay. And it's a problem. It's got to get worked out. And one of the solutions is to hire more hygienists, but the code of regulations, have in my view, artificially suppress the amount of hygienists can come up. I know I had a really lively panel at the ADSO meeting in San Diego in March, where some of my panelists that were DSO CEOs were saying, hey, you got to change these regulations on the ratio of instructors to students. It's artificially too low. And if you do that, we can graduate more hygienists and fix some of this. If you don't do that, then we're going to have an artificially suppressed or an artificially low number of hygienists come out of school. And this shortage situation is going to continue to cause all these problems.
Well, speaking of panels that you've been on and panels that you're organizing, talk to us a little bit about the Dykema DSO conference that's coming up in August.
Oh, I couldn't wait. I thought you would never ask. I was sitting here answering all these other questions. Well, we're excited. We've got, we're going to have over 2,000, I'm going to predict set in attendance, right? And we're breaking our own record from last year, but I think we're going to be probably, just because we have 430 more people registered right now than we did this many days out last year of the event. That's how we track it. So, if that, sort of, extrapolation holds, I mean, we're going to
predictive analytics.
Yeah, we're doing a little Dykema analytics on the event too. We don't have AI yet. I'm sorry to say, we're doing it the old-fashioned way, but maybe we'll get an AI program for dental events soon. Nobody's sort of invented that yet, so we're a little behind the times. But we could have 2,400 people there, Beth, and we're going to set an attendance record. And we are so excited about the event this year. We just got stuff that's new speakers that haven't done it. We got a club, people. I mean, I hate to be frivolous here, but from 11 to 2 a.m., we got the club now, and we got pyro. I just installed $100,000 of smoke machines and pyrotechnics, and the CEO of Independence, Lane, is going to DJ this. I mean, John McEnroe's coming. We got the drone show again. I mean, it's just really, really, Ray Caruso's band is playing, Spasmatics, just a lot of things. It's going to be really, really fun.
Well, and the content and the networking are always amazing. And it feels like this year, the networking opportunities are beginning earlier than ever.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's right. People are coming Monday. I mean, we've probably used to be, this is our 12th year, so I've been there all 12. People used to cruise in Wednesday. I used to. If you went back 6-7 years ago, I'd fly in like Wednesday morning and, all right, we're getting started later today. But now it's like I'm showing up a Thursday before, the weekend before, because there's just that much stuff to do. And, I'd say we're going to have 600 people there on Monday. Okay, the thing don't even start till Wednesday, and there's 600 people there Monday, and they're there Monday because on Tuesday, there's a lot of stuff, including, wait for it, the Planet DDS Cabana Party that I can't wait to go to. It's going to be really, really awesome. I think there's a wait list. I think because it's my conference, I'm allowed to go. Like, I'm not on the wait list. I can go. Unfortunately, there's a wait list. I wouldn't let you have it if I couldn't go to it. It's so cool. But there's a wait list now, and I don't know, I don't know how that's going to work. It's a shame. I knew this would happen. It's such a cool thing, and it's oversubscribed, and people are there. I don't know. I'm kidding, but send some money to Beth, bribe her, do something. Maybe she can help. But but that's really, really cool event. A Woman in DSO, I know they're going to have an AI conference that they're putting on now from 1 to 5 o'clock, I think, on that Tuesday. Also, this is really cool, cutting edge AI stuff. There's several other sort of pre-event things going on, on that Tuesday. And then Wednesday, there's more workshops than we've ever had before. We got like 7 of those, going on. And then, of course, the conference kicks off with the Woman in DSO Ascend event at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. And, we're going to have 500-600 people here coming in Monday. By Tuesday, it's probably 1,000. And then, then everybody else kind of comes. But think about that, like 1,000 people, on a Tuesday, the day before the event even begins. I mean, most people would be thrilled if they had 1,000 people show up for prime time on their event. And we got it like the day before.
Some of the events that I'm really looking forward to is that we're going to have a podcast studio there for the first time. And so on Thursday, we have Steve Belt and we have other
Well, you got a
DSO
lot of
leaders that are
stuff.
coming
Wait a
in.
minute. No. You got the podcast, and I'm going to get interviewed. I'm excited about that. I said, as busy as I get, I'm making time, Beth, because we got so much fun when we do this stuff. So yes, you got the podcast, but you're issuing that report. The thing I think that excites me about Planet DDS, and look, everybody listening, they paid for the microphone, so I got to do it. But I'm excited though. Look, you did that industry leading report on DSO statistics, and you're going to actually deliver an updated version of that, because that came out like February or something, but you've updated it through August, and you're going to actually deliver that report on a breakout. So if you want to be serious, okay, the Cabana party's not serious, but I'll be there and that's fun. But you want to be serious, issuing that report is really, really cool. Another thing is Planet DDS is co-sponsoring the technology thing with the Dental Innovation Alliance, and that's really exciting. That's going to be a deep dive into tech stacks and PMS systems and stuff, and that's Wednesday. That's kind of a workshop that's going on. So, I'm excited about that too.
And I just talked to Jill Nesbitt, who's going to be...
She's involved in that. Yep.
And so she's going to be Wednesday at 2:15 p.m. And what she's going to be doing is an interactive session. So she's going to be polling the people, the DSO leaders that are in the room for this vendor-free session, and really talking about what are people using? What are they seeing? What's working? How did they implement it? How did they get adoption within their organizations on it? And I think
she had incredible attendance last year. She did something similar. I mean, she's really like beefed it up and, given it even, really enhanced what she's doing this year. But last year she did a more skeleton, bare bones version of that. And she had like 50 people in the room, and they were all DSO executives. So they really wanted to hear that again. So now she's coming back in conjunction with DIA and Planet DDS. And that's going to be an awesome, I think I'm speaking at I'm going to be a lot of different places, but I'm giving some remarks at that as well, because I'm so excited about all that technology.
Well, it's so cool. We're so looking forward to it. For everyone that would like to have more information about it, you can go to the DSO.com and then look up the conference from that point there. And if you'd like to reach Brian, you can email him at dykema@dykema.com. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Beth. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. To learn more about Planet DDS, please visit planetdds.com. From great information from dental industry experts like Brian to technology that can make your life easier, you can depend on Planet DDS.